Hello, this is Dr. Dennis Bielfeldt of the Christ School of Theology. We are doing here a series of lectures on faith, knowledge, and reason, which are lectures dealing with the philosophical presuppositions of the theological tradition. We're basically dealing with material now between the 14th and 17th centuries. Right now, I'm talking a little bit about Occam. As we get off of this shore, I want to say a few things more. I want to describe a little bit more of the shoreline here. And then we'll go into the Reformation and the first science and get, hopefully, by the end of this series of lectures, up to the time of Descartes. Okay? So I want to talk about three things having to do with Occam. First, his theory of language, or his philosophy of language. And then a bit about his view of what it is to know, which we might call Occam's epistemology, right? And then something about his metaphysics, okay? He distinguishes in language, and we've talked about this before, but I'm not sure everyone's watched 72 lectures, so he distinguishes between categorematic language, categorematic, and syncategorematic. And of course, this distinction for him is not new. I mean, this is inherited in the tradition. It goes way back. But he says that categorematic language has meaning by reference to real things. And when you think about Occam over and against Scotus in the earlier tradition, I want you to think extensionalism, okay? Occam is an extensionalist, right? He's very concerned with reference. He's very concerned with denotation. He wants to understand meaning in terms of reference. Now, this is much more complicated than that, but I at least want to get it on the table. That in his significatio theory, words in the mental language signify things in the world. They primarily signify the individual things in the world. Only secondarily do they signify what could be called a nature. Of course, he doesn't believe in natures, but a batch of qualities, if you will, right, that resemble other batches of qualities. Okay, so categorematic language has reference to real things. And the categorematic language is the language of logic that connects the terms that refer to things in the world. He distinguishes signs of first intention, he calls, signifying extramental entities, from signs of second intention, which signify linguistic terms themselves. So he has in place what we call the use-mention distinction. And of course, the medieval philosophers understood this distinction. The language is used to mention the world. The language can also be used to mention language. Right? That's the distinction between first intention and second intention. He distinguishes material supposition, personal supposition, and simple supposition. And only in personal supposition do terms stand for extra-linguistic objects. Now, I've talked so much about supposition theory before that if you're watching this, I refer you back to earlier lectures. I can't do it all again. Okay, he believes that modality is de dicto and not de re. Now, this is huge. De dicto and not de re. So some of you are saying, well, what do you mean by this? Well, like any good philosopher, we get to a good part of the lecture, we go into Latin, right? So that's very clear. De dicto means concerning the proposition. De re means concerning the thing. So he's saying that necessity attaches to propositions and not things. Now you're saying, so? Well, I mean, this is huge. And of course, 20th century philosophy in general believed this, right? That necessity can only attach to propositions. So the very idea that God is a necessary being makes no sense whatsoever. You can say that it's necessarily the case that God has omnipotent properties. That would be a necessity attaching to the proposition. But you couldn't say that something is necessarily God, right? To claim of an item in the world that it's necessary is a confusion. And Occam is spotting this way back in the 14th century. He claims that misunderstandings about language make us believe there are extramental references to abstract terms. So, I mean, here he is doing a bit of analysis, and he will say that there are pseudo propositions, if you will, right? And pseudo entities. Because I can talk about sheep, I start to think there is something called sheepness that happens to be over in this sheep or that sheep or that sheep. But of course, this is just a misunderstanding about language. Why must the world somehow be like the language that we use in talking about it? He says that terms supposit absolutely when they supposit, that is, refer to the same individual, but some can supposit connotatively when they secondarily refer to notions like whiteness, which can be in many entities. And this is the distinction as well between primary and secondary reference. Terms primarily signify when they supposit absolutely, but secondarily signify when they supposit connotatively. I hope this is all clear. Occam also allows that this connotative use, he allows this in abstract naming of sensible objects like whiteness, but of course he doesn't think there are any such things as whiteness. Right? Okay, Occam on knowledge. Real science is comprised of propositions about actual entities. Right? Rational science of propositions about terms. He says that non-demonstrable knowledge concerns self-evident propositions like the whole is greater than the parts, or evident empirical propositions like all heat gives warmth. This gets very interesting as this line develops into Bacon. Demonstrable knowledge consists of non-demonstrable propositions operated upon syllogistically. Now, if you're catching what I'm saying that this man, William of Ockham, has foundationalistic, right, tendencies as a philosopher, right? There is, we start with terms that directly relate to objects in the world, right? This is intuitive, the so-called intuitive propositions, intuitive terms. And after we've made reference to objects in the world, then we can build up propositions and we can infer further propositions from former propositions. This foundationalism, of course, is characteristic of much of 20th century philosophy, this commitment to foundationalism and the so-called given, that there is a given in experience and that we begin with this given, and this given then refers or connects with language in a particular way, and then language connects with language in particular ways, so we can know a lot of propositions from these other propositions. And then if we know these propositions, we can go back and understand a bit about the structure of the world. All right, I will come back, finish Occam on knowledge, go into metaphysics. I'll be right back with you. Dr. Dennis Bielfeldt, Christ School of Theology. Thanks.